So we got our theme set up, and this is of course very useful because it means that we don't have to manually overwrite all these stylings in different parts of our app. But sometimes you of course wanna overwrite certain styles in your app, but you also at the same time might want to use, for example, colors from your main theme. And how could you do that then? Well, let's for example start in expense item. Here, in expense item, we might want to change the look of our expense title. And for that, of course, we can add the style parameter to this text widget as we did it before in this course as well. And we could manually create a text style object here to set up the styling of the text. But now that we learned about theming, we can also reach out to our theme stylings and apply those to this text here. And to do that, we can use the theme class built into Flutter, which has an auth method, which needs the context as a value. And that is a pattern we saw before with the scaffold messenger. There we also had such an auth method to basically reach out to this metadata context object managed by Flutter. The theme class needs to do the same thing. It is constructed by connecting it to this context object. And this connection is needed because through that context object, Flutter gets access to our theme settings basically. And now on that theme class or on that theme object that was created here, we can, for example, access the text theme property to get access to all the text themes that we set up and all the default text themes that were set up automatically that we didn't overwrite. And then, for example, reach out to title large. And this will then apply the text styles that are set up for title large, so either the default text styles or, as in this case, our own text style which we set up for title large. And this text style will now be applied to this expense title. And you can see this more clearly if we go back to the main Dart file and we change the font weight of our title large here from normal to bold and maybe increase the font size to 16. If we do that and force a reload, you now see that this title here in our expense item clearly is bold and has a different look. Please also note that it has a different color than we have here in the app bar, because of course, as mentioned before, in the app bar we're setting a separate foreground color, whereas here we're setting a different general color for title large. And it's this color here, which is now picked up by expense item. As you can again see if I change this back to colors red. Briefly, of course, only, but if I do that, you see that now the title is indeed red. So that's how you can use some settings you set up in your general theme in your own widgets. And of course, here I'm switching back to the actual color I want to use. So that's how we can pick up theme settings. Now, of course, here I also want to make sure that this title is actually pushed all the way to the left here. And to achieve this, I don't need to do any theming. Instead, I can simply go to this column that contains my text here and set the cross-axis alignment, which for a column is the horizontal axis, to cross-axis alignment start. And this will make sure that all the column items are moved to the start of the column horizontally, so to the left in this case. So that's how we can reach out to our theme to use certain values from that theme. But we're not limited to using text settings. For example, in my expenses list, I also want to add a background color to this dismissible item, so that as we swipe an item away, we actually have a little background effect that indicates to us that the item will be deleted. And this can be achieved by going to the dismissible widget and setting the background property or parameter there. Now the background parameter wants a widget. And for that here, we could use the built-in container widget, because this widget allows us to set a lot of different parameters, including the color, which is actually the background color of the container. As you see here, the color it paints behind a possible child widget you might include in the container, and that therefore allows us to set up a background color, and this of course wants a color. Now, as before in this course, we could create a color manually here, but now that we learned about theming, we can also pick a color with theme off from our theme, and that allows us to pick a color that's more in line with our general color scheme. And to do that, we can access theme of and then .color scheme to get hold of that color scheme we set up in our main Dart file. Remember, we created this color scheme with one seed color. Now, as mentioned, this behind the scenes creates a lot of different shades and variations of that color for different aspects of the app. And we can now use those shades and variants here to access the error color, which is one of the automatically generated variations of our seed color for error scenarios. If I do this and I save everything, you will see that as I swipe this item here, I get this red background container coming in, indicating to me that this is going to be deleted. Of course, here we then also could apply some fine tuning and, for example, add a margin with edge insets and then use symmetric to add some horizontal margin of 16. So that with that, if I force a reload, this container actually starts where the list item also starts. But of course, here we would have the problem that if we ever change the margin of the list item, we have to change it here as well. And you might remember that in main Dart, I actually set the margin of the card theme here to horizontal 16. So that's actually where this margin here is coming from. So therefore, since this is defined in our theme in this application here, we of course can get this margin from our theme by again using theme of and then getting the card theme and there the margin. Or if I only want to apply the horizontal margin, as it's the case here, I still create an edge insets object with symmetric to set my horizontal margin, but this value is then derived from my theme by accessing cardtheme.margin.horizontal. And here I'm getting an error that in the end margin could theoretically be null because I might not have set it up in my theme, but here I know that it was set up, hence I can add an exclamation mark to get rid of this error. And with that I get the same effect as before, but now it's coming from my actual theme. And these are all things you can do. Now, being able to use theme data for fine-tuning certain widgets is a very useful feature. And it does not stop at simply using values defined in the theme. Instead, you can also extend or change those values. For example, for a color like error or any other color, you can also use one of the built-in methods Flutter offers on colors, like with opacity, to make this color slightly transparent. For example, by adding an opacity of 0.75. If you do that, you will see that now this red tone is slightly transparent. Now you might or might not want this, but it is important to understand that you can adjust those theme-controlled values in the places where you're using them. For example, in expense item, we're also not limited to using the title theme like this. We could also use copy with here to use our general title large theme settings, but then override them with specific settings that we want to use specifically here in this widget. So which will not be changed in the general theme, but which will be adjusted in this widget, whilst still basing our general style on the theme settings. Now here I actually got no adjustments I want to make, but it is important to be aware of these fine-tuning possibilities.